Good evening, everybody. My name is Asad Lalji on behalf of Avid Learning. Welcome to the Art of Collecting, unearthing the stories behind the collections. The art of collecting is a fascinating avocation that has captivated individuals and companies for centuries. Building collections encompasses various stages from research to sourcing, acquiring, preservation, care, display of exhibitions, valuation, insurance, in addition to balancing passion with investment. It is a journey that evolves over time as one refines one's interests, discovers new treasures, and connects with fellow collectors. Passion shaped the collection as one embarks on this rewarding voyage of discovery. When the announcement of the Maharaja's Treasures exhibition at the NGMA was made, we decided we'd celebrate this momentous occasion and planned a multidimensional art trilogy between Avid Learning and the NGMA, with the Maharaja as the muse. As you're aware, the Air India collection is a testament to the diversity of India's art and culture, with the airline playing a pivotal role as a patron in promoting and celebrating works of many artists internationally. In our first episode, we looked at art beyond the canvas. Then we had a children's art workshop where the kids were taken for a walk through around the museum, and then they created their own little versions of the Air India Maharaja. This brings me to tonight's event. We are honored to have a diverse group of private, institutional collectors, curators, who will share their inspiration and rewards, their challenges in creating and maintaining exceptional collections from period furniture, silverware, glassware, ceramics, carpets, lights, jewelry, stamps, posters, and much more. At Avid Learning, we strongly believe in collaboration. We're proud to present this evening's event in partnership with the NGMA, Mumbai, the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. But before we begin, a special thanks to Director Nazneen Banu and Deputy Curator Shruti Das for hosting us again and again. It gives me great pleasure to welcome on stage our panel of experts, founder Sarmaya Arts Foundation, Paul Abraham, owner Phillips Antiques, Farooq Issa, solicitor and antiques, artifacts, and memorabilia collector Rajan Jayakar, creative director Pavitra Rajaram Design, Pavitra Rajaram, and our moderator for the evening, CEO XXL Collective, Joe Cyril. Before you think why we have this random order, it's in alphabetical order, huh? So that's the reason. But anyway, thank you all for being here in this rains. I look forward to a fascinating session, and over to you, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Asad, and thank you for having us here. Thank you all for coming, braving the rains today. Today, let's start. We're here to speak about the art of collecting, unearthing stories behind these collections. We have 4 amazing speakers who are going to be part of it. My own journey was more on the other side of collecting. I used to work at an auction house where we used to source collections for collectors, and currently at Gallery XXL introducing urban art to Indian collectors. To kind of start with a story, since we're talking about stories, recently, as part of the auction house, we were hired by the income tax department to monetize, I guess, the Nirav Modi collection. And those meetings used to take place at the Air India building. That's where the income tax department sits out of. More than the collection which we were supposed to work on, the conversations were around the Air India collection also. Because the officers, who all had an amazing view, used to talk about stories of the past, about how all their walls used to have great paintings. That's where my interest started. I befriended a Malayali caretaker who was managing the collection then. There was talk about, is it going back to the bidders? Is it going to be kept with the government, or is it going to be sold? So in all that curiosity, I mean, I'm just so happy to know that this collection's finally, or part of the collection's part of the public view. If you haven't seen it as yet, please go see the show. India, I think, has a 5,000-year history of art and culture. It starts with the antiquities. whether it's sculptural works during the Mughal era, especially around the Mughal era, miniature paintings. Then you move to the moderns, where you have Raja Ravi Verma, the Bombay Progressives, the Bengal School, to contemporary art. And along with that, you have folk and tribal art and mid-century furniture. But parallel to this whole history of art, there's collectors and patrons behind it, which also is the reason why we have such a flourishing history. Initially, it used to be royal houses. Say around the latter part of the 20th century, we had a lot of important corporate collectors, the ITC Maurya, TIFR, Air India itself. And in the last, 30, 40, 50 years, we see the role of individual art collectors who've taken on a much larger role, say, of museums, say like Surmaya, who's come up. And with that, I think we have a great group of speakers, collectors, to kind of talk about their collecting, their collections. I think we'll start with introductions. Pavitra, we're going to start with you.
Sure. You'd like me to introduce myself and my collection?
Yes.
So my name is Pavitra Rajaram. I'm never sure how to describe myself, because honestly I have built my practice quite organically. Nowadays it's the fashionable thing to be able to jump between streams and do different things. But I started out doing that many years ago, just because that's how my interests were, and I've always been lucky enough to have the opportunity to work in different areas. So I run a practice that's really focused around 4 different areas. The first one is product design. I was the lead designer of Good Earth for almost 25 years. I set up 3 brands, Good Earth, Nicobar, and Paro. And so product design is a central part of our practice. We also do interiors and architectural projects in India. And many members from my team are here, and I must say that we're a small but very proud team to do really lovely, bespoke, interesting projects in India across retail, hospitality, residences, and conservation. So that's a big part of the practice. The third aspect is corporate strategy. I have advised various companies who have a proposition in the design space, and I'm currently design director at Asian Paints. And the fourth piece is really something that I've done all my life, and now I'm privileged and lucky to do with my husband, which is to really look at craft and conservation and telling India's stories in a way that reaches a wide audience. So this is really how my practice is structured, and a little bit about that. And now I'll take you through my collection. I'll have to crane my neck to see these. I actually started out collecting textiles. And when I say collecting textiles, I say that very loosely, because I had no idea that I was collecting. I would travel, I would see really beautiful things, and then what would end up happening was, in everything that I saw. So like I was saying, I'm passionate about textiles, and I have been since I was very young, and therefore I started collecting without realizing that I'm collecting. And this is our home in Kunur, a home that Paul and I restored, where a lot of our textiles are. But I'm going to show you some of the really special textiles in my collection. This is an early 20th century ikat chapan. And of course, these are magnificent because the ikats were woven in what is today modern-day Uzbekistan. And the lining is a Russian roller print, a screen print, which bears, in its design identity, is very close to the Indian chint, which is where the word chintz comes from. And I've always been fascinated by how textiles tell the stories of migration, of geography, of history, and the intermingling of cultures. So this is one of the favorite pieces in my collection, which I acquired in Istanbul in 2006. These again are 2 splendid textiles. The one on this side, the blue one, is a Russian roller textile again, but it's called a bokcha. So it's traditionally a scarf that was used in ceremonial occasions. When you sent a gift to someone, you sort of covered trays with it, and these were printed and used for really festive occasions. And again, this takes inspiration from the chintz, and I love it. The one on the other side, the pink one, is a Bagh Phulkari. And of course, Phulkaris come in many ways, but the Baghs really belong to the Northwest Frontier Province area, and they're usually geometric. But what is special about this is the Nazar Battu. So if you'll notice, it's a completely embroidered textile, but it has that white diamond in the center. And this is a very, very interesting idea. And in my collection now, I actually actively look for pieces like that, pieces that are deliberately imperfect. Because one thing that you'll see in the craft world across, sorry, I have my backs to you guys. One thing that you'll see in the craft world, whether you go east to west or north to south, is a deep respect and a love for acknowledging the divine or the presence of something greater than yourself when you create something. So this idea of the flaw, the deliberate flaw, is something that you'll see in carpets, you'll see it in textiles, you'll see it across craft, across the world. And it's a way of acknowledging that at the end of the day, we are human, and ultimately perfection is divine. So I love that, and I now actively, in my collection, look for pieces that have a deliberate flaw. These again, the one on this side is a beautiful mud resist textile from West Africa, and it's of course in natural indigo. And this one is by the Lampung tribe. It's a tapis mani or a sarong. So it's cotton woven with a double weft and then embroidered with ceremonial gold thread, traditionally worn by men. And this I acquired in Indonesia in 2008. Of course, contemporary art is also something that I've loved, and I tend to focus on women artists, that not consciously, but I seem to gravitate towards that, and art that kind of reflects the aesthetics of the miniature tradition. The painting here, Savitri Through the Ages of Man, is by an artist called Rajshri Thakkar. It's one of the first paintings I acquired, and I hope later on you'll give me a chance to tell you a story about it, when we talk about how we get things. And I bought this in 1998 from Jahangir Art Gallery. I just moved to Bombay. I would take the bus from Worli Seaface to Jahangir Art Gallery to look at the art. I had a 9-month baby, and I would spend the day looking at paintings. And this is a painting I acquired then. The one on the other side is, of course, the British artist Lubna Chowdhury. It's called Code Switch. It's a recent acquisition, and I love how she plays with geometric and totemic forms that still come back to shapes and symbols that we identify culturally with in India, you know. So these two works. This is by Varunika Saraf from a show called Caput Mortem. Again, a work that I absolutely love. I believe that art is politics and politics is art. And particularly in the times that we live in now, it's so important for us as artists and creative people to express our point of view. And I think Varunika does that beautifully. She's also probably one of the finest artists who draws in the contemporary idiom, and I love her work. This is Gates of Horn and Ivory by Ritika Merchant, which I got from the very lovely Henna Kapadia, who's here in the audience. There she is. Ritika's work is super special because, you know, of course, she combines allegory and myth and just transverses the boundaries that we see between India and other parts of the world. She was also my first ever intern when she was in school. She interned with me and spent a summer creating design with me, so it's a special connection. Very quickly, the one on the right is by the artist Shakuntala Kulkarni. It's called And When She Roared, the Universe Quaked. And I love the idea of power and allegory, and then how she uses these images on, you know, in these miniature paintings. It's also very special because it was gifted to me by Paul very early on when we met, so it's special. And this is by N.S. Harsha. It's actually a silkscreen print. This is a scarf that he created, limited edition scarves for Hermes. I couldn't afford the original painting, so I bought the scarf. I love it as much. So yes, that's it. And then I think I wanted to also show you a few objects, because I think in my collection objects are a big part. This one on the right is something that I got from that gentleman over there. He taught me, Farooq, about sculptures from coastal Karnataka, the Bhuta sculptures. And one of the joys of the last 20 years is having conversations with people like Farooq, who've educated me so much, exposed me to so many different things, taught me how to read, what to read, and helped me cultivate my own interests. So this is very, very special, the Bhuta sculpture. This is a very recent acquisition from Baro Market. It's a bench cast in Dokra by the artist Suresh Wagmare. And I love how he's used the craft and changed it up to create something that's sculptural but also functional. That's a sculpture by Madhavi Subramaniam. I personally love ceramics. I don't know why, but that connection to earth and glaze is something that I really love. On this side is a piece that I chanced upon. It was an Iranian artist that I happened to run into in Dubai, Laila Farzaneh, whose work I think is quite amazing, and of course not much of it gets out of Iran, but that's a double glazed terracotta bowl from her. The one behind me is from the 10th anniversary that Sanjay Garg did for Raw Mango, where he created these 10 objects. And I love this one. It's a puppet, it's called Putla, and it's in epoxy and brass. And I think collectible design is also of the moment. And I think in my collection, I love the fact that I can also have work by modern makers and things that are there from the past. The last piece is probably the most precious thing I own and the highlight of my collection, and the only thing that I absolutely will never part with. This was a ceramic plate created by my son Prithvi when he was 8 years old. And we used to go on holidays, and Prithvi's right here. And I mean, this is the one piece that I think, so if you ask me what's at the core of my collection, it's this one, and definitely the most precious. And thank you for patiently listening to this.
Thank you, Pavitra. I think, Rajan, can we have your introduction?
So, good evening, the lovers of art and objects. I feel quite glad in this company of elite collectors and designers and what have you. I'm a solicitor by profession, but there are 2-3 things which flow from my profession also. I also belong to a community called the Pathare Prabhus, who are the first immigrants in Bombay around 1296. Well, I was not a very lover of history in my school, but as I grew up, some or the other that little gene in me of collection started showing up. And as I started looking at my community's history, I came across a doctoral thesis also of my community person who had done it in 1945 on Pathare Prabhus of Bombay. Now that huge thesis running into almost 1,000 pages, I went through it. I was quite impressed. But one thing I noticed was that while that history of my community was getting coming out of that book, I realized the history of Bombay also runs parallel to it. Because if you see, the real history of Bombay also starts around 1296. And the reason is that the person called Raja Bimber, who came from Devgari in 1296 to the Bombay Island and settled here, as he liked the place, particularly the island called Mahim, which was then Maikavati. And after settling here, there are 4 communities which came with him. And that is Pathare Prabhus, Chaukarchis, Paskarchis, and Palchika Brahmins. Now these 4 communities came, and since the time the Pathare Prabhus came in 1296, we are here. So if somebody asks me what is your native place, it is Mumbai, that is Bombay. So while doing this, I started collecting material on the history of my community itself, like kitchenware, engravings, this and the other, a lot of stuff. Then since I saw that Bombay was running parallel to my community, I started collecting in Bombay. And I must say that the first big collection which came from a place called Chor Bazaar, where I'm sure all the panelists must have visited more often. And it was an album of a judge, retired judge. And it had, apart from some of his judicial photographs, it had almost 120 picture postcards. So I came to know that picture postcards was one of the kind of collection that is possible on Bombay. Then going deep into it, I went into other collectibles of Bombay, like engravings, etchings, photographs. Then I also diversified into other things like letterheads which has got a Bombay address and all that stuff. So while doing this, my collection was increasing. But let me tell you that I did not start the collection of all this in the beginning. As I was a small child, there was no pocket money. I'm talking of when I used to go to the school from 1957 onwards. I used to pick up matchboxes which were thrown away by the people after using them and cigarette packets. Now that was something which was there for the taking. There was no question of any money involved. And I must give little credit to my mother also, because any other mother would have said, Ki, what kachra you are bringing? But no, she ensured that all that collection was kept in one place. Then she asked me whether you want this entire matchbox or you want just the label, because in those days the label used to be stuck on a wooden box. So I said, no, I just want the label. So on a Sunday, after a substantial collection of these labels, she would immerse it in a bucket of water, lukewarm water. After 10 minutes, the label will start floating up and the box will go down. Then she'll remove it, put it in the blotting paper, and then that blotting, after slightly blotting paper, to ensure that while it dries, it doesn't become a papad. So it was kept in some of the directories, English and Marathi directories, dictionaries, which were never used actually, but they were used for straightening this matchbox labels. And that's how the collection started. Other thing I must credit my parents is that, well, I was not a very bright student, but I used to pass nonetheless. So normally what happens is that when the exam comes, the parents tell you, now keep all these things for month of May vacation and then you do it. Well, I was never told that. So my exam was going on, my collection was going on, I was picking up from roads, gutters, everywhere. So that's how it started. Now, after collecting all these things, then I realized that I must have a proper catalog, I must put them in the proper order. And my daughters who said that, Dad, you collect all these things, but do you have any idea what kind of different collections you have? So I said, yes, let me now sit down and see. And I realized that I have got 50 different collections by itself. So therefore, the collection started happening. Then because of my contact with Dr. Gorakshakar of Prince of Wales Museum, I consider him as my guide friend and philosopher, who told me how to preserve it, how to catalog it, etc. Then I started doing my own exhibitions. Then I set up museums, etc. So that's how I started. So with this background, now let us go to some of the slides that I'm showing. Now this is the first slide. You will wonder what this is. I'm sure most of you know that this is a coat of arms of the city of Bombay. Now this particular Bombay was called Urbs Prima in Indies, prime city in India, in 1877. So this was the logo which was designed, which continued as a logo of the municipal corporation till we got independence. And if you see the present logo, it's a little modification of this logo itself. Next. Yeah. Now this is a view from Malabar Hill of Back Bay. Now imagine there was at the Back Bay, since Marine Drive was not there, you could see the entire panorama of Bombay right up to Kulaba. And you will see the first two towers that is there, Wilson College. So this is one of the earliest collection that I had, a very beautiful picture postcard. And I was quite fascinated with this picture postcard because that was in the forefront in that album which I found. Next. You will be surprised that Taj Mahal Palace Hotel came in 1903. But and this logo came along with that in 1903. I got their own stationery on which this particular logo is there. But as I go along, I find that around 1909 or 1910, they discarded this logo. If I was the owner of Taj Mahal Hotel today, I would put it in the forefront. It's as if somebody has taken an injunction that you can't use this logo because there's an elephant or a crown. But see the detailing. Taj Mahal, so therefore you are talking of a Mahal. If you see just below the words Palace Hotel, there's a little dome. So that goes to show it is Taj. This is the Taj Mahal. Taj means the crown that is there. Mahal is the dome. Palace. Palace, I would say that something to do with the elephant as palace, and this is how the logo was designed. Now this logo is completely out. So therefore it has become a real collectible item. It is on their own stationery and I've got some used picture postcards, and I find that after around 1909, these picture postcards are gone. Next. This is a very interesting matchbox label. Of course, this was not part of the collection when I picked it up from the road. This is a much later collection. See the elements. On the top it says safety matches. Then it is Shiva. Then the Shiva's picture is there. made in Japan for Tata and Son. Now, how do you collate all these things? First thing is that safety matches started around 1890 or 1900. Before that, they were not safety matches. So if you put it in your pocket and you dash against something, the whole pocket will burn. So these are the safety matches where you have to strike on the particular surface of that. Secondly, Shiva. Now, since it is made in Japan, you will see Shiva a little chinky. He is not the Shiva that we are used to. Yeah. And Tata and Sons. Now, what has Tata and Sons got to do with all this Japan and all that? You will not believe, this is a lithograph, and Tata and Sons advertised themselves on a cheap commodity like Matchbox label, because they wanted the labels to be, because there were so many contenders and there were so many people who were in competition. So they wanted these labels to become popular. In fact, there is a 6 label set, which I had the opportunity to show it to JRD Tata. So this is one of them, because I found the interesting part was the Shiva part. Rest of them has got different designs. So this is one of the one from the set in that collection. And so my friend said that you are collecting Matchbox labels. We see in the Limca Book of Record of 1995 that a person from Delhi has got some 31 things. Then I realized I got 75,000. How can they? So he said, no, you must put. I said, I'm not interested in publicity. He said, no, it gives a wrong impression that India there are only 31,000. So I put it, and today its collection is about 2.5 lakh. Next. Shahid Bhagat Singh. Now this is a booklet of Shammi Kapoor's film, and Shammi Kapoor himself doesn't know whether this film was ever released. I've got some songs from that book, from that film, in 70 and RPM form, but this is the film which, and in my opinion, there are so many Shahid Bhagat Singh films which have come. Shammi Kapoor with this makeup looks nearest to what actual Shahid Bhagat Singh was. Now, little Shammi Kapoor story. I was in those days when we were in school, we used to be shown movies, Ben-Hur, 10 Commandments, and all that stuff. We never saw a Hindi film. So one day from my school, a batch of children, I would say children only, they bunked the school and went to see this Jungli at Roxy Cinema. Since they were in the school uniform, they were driven away by the doorkeeper. So after 2-3 days, I decided why not we also try. So another batch of them. Luckily, the doorkeeper was not there, and I saw that film Jungli, and I was really floored. Thereafter, I became complete fan of Shammi Kapoor, and I started collecting everything on Shammi Kapoor, like posters, songbooks, even photographs. The songbooks also in color form like this, and some of them the cheap one they used to get for 10 nama paisa and all that. So with that collection, it became so big. So I thought that I'll just show one picture which people have not seen. I'm 100%. I have also not seen this. So this is Shammi Kapoor for you. Next. This has got a fantastic story. This is a ticket of horse-drawn tram. Now, horse-drawn tram started in Bombay from 1875 to 1907, I have mentioned. And this ticket, along with that came a little bit of like a brochure page of GIP Railway, which was now to the Central Railway. That is, that time it was Great Indian Peninsula Railway. And these two tickets, this is the front side and the back side is of a different ticket, not of this. So these two tickets where they take you from Sassoon-Dock to Parel and Parel to Sassoon-Dock. Now, how do you say this ticket is old? Because if you see the fifth one, Bori Bandar. Now, Bori Bandar clearly goes to show that VT had not come up. VT came in 1888. So this is Bori Bandar is pre-1888. So that's how you really did the ticket. Now, this ticket did not come out of any dealer. In fact, in Delhi, I had picked up a book on old Bombay, and these two tickets were there as a bookmark. So the value of these tickets are much more than the book itself. So that's how this came up. Then I did a little study, and I found out that quite a few places which are mentioned here, see the spellings like Paiduni and all those things. So, and there used to be two type of horse-drawn trams in Bombay. One was one horse-drawn, which was 24 passengers, and two with 36 passengers. So these tickets were there for that particular thing, and see the fare. And also notice, it is Bombay Tramway Company, but electricity had not come up. So it is not BEST, it is Bombay Tramway Company. Next. Now this is the bowl which I picked up from, of course, Chor Bazaar, Watson's Esplanade Hotel. Now this hotel came up in 1871. Mr. Watson, who was the owner, architect and a hotelier. He in fact purchased the place where Watson Hotel is there near Kala Ghoda, that place, for starting a store. Then somewhere down the line, after buying it in auction from Bombay government, he decided that I'm going to start a hotel. Now, ordinarily at that time, the different buildings which were under construction were the Victorian Gothic in stone and Kurla and Dhangadra and all stones. This fellow decided I'm going to get my all stuff in cast iron and wrought iron directly from England. So he places an order in Liverpool, gets all the building material, including the bricks, and brings them to Bombay. And like a mechano, this building is done up in 6 months because everything came ready. Now this hotel closed in 1920, but still this kind of thing keeps on coming out in Chor Bazaar from somewhere, maybe from Parsi collectors or something. And this is one of the bowl which is there. And I also have a beer glass. I also have a soap dish. So there are quite a few bits of Watson Hotel which are there. Next. Now this is a picture postcard which is one of the earliest. Of course, Farooq must be having it, but not many people have seen it. Yeah. See the picture postcard. These are actually paintings, very crude paintings, but it's a negative colored picture postcard showing Flora Fountain. The building that you see, the big building that you see there, is where today Bank of India stands. And there is the Elephanta Caves. Elephanta Caves, incidentally, were always considered to be part of a satellite part of Bombay. And the Brahmin. Now this is a Bombay picture postcard, but it is printed in Calcutta. D. Macropolo, who subsequently started producing cigarettes also. So this is the very earliest picture postcard. And it has got I didn't show the back side, but there is a stamp and which goes to show that it is of 1899. Now the best part is that these picture postcards, I presume that there must be at least 6. I've been always talking to him. I have found out 4, but there are definitely 6. You will see that ordinarily, where the matter is written, there should have been the address. But no, address was at the back, and it is called a unified back because the entire back space was to be used only for address. And this is a little space which is there for message. So this is one of the picture postcard, one of my collections. Yeah. It is not very difficult to get an old telephone. Incidentally, I have a phone which is again of 1896, but of course there was no telephone working there, but it came from England. But it is difficult to get a directory. And this is, if you see, the common directory for Bombay, Ahmedabad and Karachi. And why is it so difficult? Because in those days you had to exchange your old directory to get a new one. So somebody must have obviously forgotten, or maybe they had more than one phone and they only did that exchanging. And it has on the first page is the Dadaji Jaji advertisement of Packard. Now Dadaji Jaji incidentally are at the Sanders Bridge. Yeah. So this is Bombay Telephone Company. So these are some of my diverse collections, and I'll talk more about it when I talk about it.
Thank you for that. Farooq, your introductions.
Hello everyone. So Cyril has warned me to be brief. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about this particular thing, which is porcelain made for India, Oriental porcelain. And it's something that's fascinated me for a long time. So basically, Chinese porcelain, and less so from Japan and Korea, Vietnam, came to India right from the, I would say, 13th century onwards. But I'm going to speak more about shipwreck cargo, which is porcelain which was on ships sailing from China to India and the West, and which sank mostly in the South China Sea, off the coast of Vietnam, Straits of Malacca. And one ship in particular, called the Diana, was sailing in 1817 from China, Canton, to Madras, and was carrying a lot of cargo, including a lot of Chinese porcelain, but all destined for Madras. So you can just flip the slide. And so on the left you'll see, so this ship was discovered in about 1980s. Okay, and they found, besides the porcelain, so on the right are 2 pieces of Chinese porcelain from an earlier cargo, which is the Wung Tao, I'm showing you this because these were actually made for the Indian market, and they have, they're actually googlets or hookahs, okay? They're hookahs, but you can't see in the picture, but they've lost their glaze, being submerged for a couple of hundred years. The cargo was 1690 or something, but discovered in the 80s. And so the sea salt has made the glaze matte. On the left, you'll see how they found the cargo on the seabed with shells, mollusks, encrusted. Many were broken, but many were intact. Next slide, please. This is the Dyna cargo. Now, this is a plate, Chinese, with the coat of arms of the East India Company. This was ordered in China, and the ship was 1817. So we know exactly the date of the porcelain was 1817. So this was headed to, next slide, to Government House Madras. That's the Governor of Madras, Hugh Elliot. And they already had existing, they had hundreds of pieces from this set. They kept ordering, they kept breaking them, so they ordered more and they ordered more. But all British like government, Bombay Presidency, Madras, Calcutta, were using the same service. But the particular ship was headed for Madras, and that's Government House Madras. I think my Daniel or somebody, the print is. Okay, now, in addition to porcelain made for Government House, they also did porcelains for Indian rulers. For example, the plate is made for Nawab Muhammad Ali Khan Walaja of the Carnatic, inscribed with his name. Very simple, so it's an 18th century plate. As time went on, the plates became more elaborate with gold, enameled decoration. The next slide is his son, second son, Amirul Umara, and that's a plate made for him. These dinner sets would be ordered in quantity. Like they'd order a whole set of dinnerware, cups, bowls, plates. This is one of them. And just to tell you that this, the cargoes that they found at when they discovered these shipwrecks started right from the mid 17th century up to, this is the latest one, 1817 was the Dyna cargo. But they contained tremendous range of items. Porcelains was one of the cargoes, but certainly tea was a major cargo that they carried to India. And the final slide I'm going to show you is again of, so they ordered porcelains made for the Indian market, but they wanted the shapes also to be copied. So they would send wooden molds to China with, sometimes painted, sometimes just for the shapes, sizes. So this is a Bidri example from 1650, which was copied in Japan, and the U on the right is 1690. But you can see the shapes are fairly similar.
This is in your collection.
So yeah, I've got a few of these pieces. So anyway, I've focused the talk on a very specific, we have collections going into various things. But I thought let's just dwell on this particular aspect of, which is not very well known. Not many people are aware of, porcelains made for the Indian market. So anyway, it gives you some idea of what these things were. And there's a lot of other things too, but it's just a little taste of what these are. Yeah, thanks.
Now we have the introduction from Paul.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the collections. Of course, I represent Sarmaya, which is a museum which some of you may be aware of and some of you may not, but it's an archive based in Dadar, and these collections are all kept there and used for programming and outreach, largely with youngsters. That's the mission. Of course, you can read it at leisure. In the current context, I'm going to talk about when things predated this time. And really, the journey started for me with a gift from my father of a little Vaseline bottle with a few coins of Travancore. My dad moved from Kerala to Delhi, and that's where I was born and grew up. And I developed an interest in coins, but coins in Delhi were largely Islamic. I couldn't collect Travancore sitting in Delhi, so I got interested in Islamic coins and started this journey, chasing down Islamic coins and primarily Mughal. So that's where this journey started way back in the 80s. So I, used to go to coin fairs, and like Rajan said earlier, initially no money, but in some senses I think it was a great opportunity, because when you don't have money you have to do other things like learn about the subject to start with. So I used to read, I used to talk to people and things like that, and much later in life when one started to have a little bit of money, then one started the acquisition as such. But the interest started with this one little, and I have this exact same bottle kept with me. It sits in my house. It's a particular precious object. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so there are 2-3 streams to the collections, and one of them, of course, is again, like how Rajan and all the other speakers have talked about, is grounded in history. My love for history, I think, largely, again, influenced by my father, who was somebody whose interest in history was just amazing, and he would, be very, very careful and, conscious about making all the children aware of our historical context all the time. So there was a love for history. And because it started with coins, especially Islamic coins, one of the things was that even 100 years ago, mints on these coins are named very differently from what it is today. So I used to hunt for some old maps to try and identify the older names for mints, so like Lucknow would be Akhtar Nagar, Agra was Akbarabad and things like that. So in the older maps, those are the references. So I got into maps. I got into, whenever I used to go to collect maps, for example, invariably those people would have engravings. So got interested in engravings, but largely around the main theme of Mughal. And of course, rare books. But what was interesting is the Mughal Empire finished with the Great Mutiny of 1857. And once when I was in London, I managed to locate a bunch of photographs by a photographer called Felice Beato, which was, he had come to India to cover the mutiny. And it was incredible because around that time, photography, about 10 years prior to that, photography had literally, developed. And so the British were very keen to document the empire. So they sent out, a lot of photographers trying to document every aspect of the empire. But Felice Beato was called, he was covering the Crimean War, and he was called to come quickly to cover the mutiny. But by the time he landed in Calcutta, the mutiny was over. But he nevertheless went to all the key places, so Kanpur, Delhi, and all of these places. And in some places, he actually staged, so he put dead bodies in front of specific places and took pictures. So because it had a connection to Mughal history, I started to, I collected those. And then, of course, in each of these genres, I ended up building a collection because I started to like the genre itself. So history gave rise to, all these streams in the collection. This particular coin is of some interest now that we are talking about specifics. This is a coin of a Mughal pretender emperor called Nikusir. It's the only coin of this emperor known in the public domain in the whole world. And if it were not for this coin, it would be very difficult to establish that this guy ever sat on the throne. But he did out of Agra for a few days. Next. The other part was indigenous and traditional Indian community living practices. And this had its origin in my one very early visit to Bhimbetka. Most of you must know Bhimbetka is south of Bhopal. It's a spectacular place, over 600 recorded caves with paintings going back 12 to 15,000 years. And with all that rock art, one said that in this part of the world there has to be more of this tradition. And in Bhopal, in those days, I went to the home of one of the gents who just in general inquiry, someone said, yes, there is a bunch of guys, they're called Gonds, they live in Bhopal, they do paintings. So I went there, and it was amazing because that tribal art, I am sure, had in so many ways their origins way back in those cave paintings, because it's very, very beautiful, it's raw, it's rustic, it's nature, it's, and it's a collective community-based effort, and literally came onto paper and canvas very, very recently. Otherwise, it was stuff that is painted on the walls. So that's where it started, and then, of course, spread into quite a few areas. So, leather puppets from Andhra, Fad from Rajasthan, Matani Pachhedi from Gujarat, Patua from Bengal and Odisha, and so on. So there's a good collection of that, but started with a chance visit to a cave complex in central India. This, of course, is a collection which, my first ever work was a Badri Narayan painting, which I bought in Chennai from a gallery called Sakshi. In those days, Sakshi was only in Chennai. And what was interesting was that I used to work for a bank called Greenlays, and my boss had decided that in one of the branches in every main city, we'd have an art gallery to promote art. And there were two of us, myself and a guy called Rajan Godgalkar. We were trainees, and we were assigned the job of managing the art and the art, displays. And one day he said, there's one artist who's going to come. And we had a branch in Mount Road, and on the first floor, there was a training center. He said, please commandeer the training center because this artist is going to come. And he's going to paint a few canvases for over a month, and you guys have to manage him. And so this gent comes in the evening in a cab, drops 20, 30 canvases, and he says that I'll come tomorrow and start. We request you to just buy a bottle, of whiskey and keep it there for me. So we were there, and then this man worked away. In the evening, he used to drink, and then when these paintings were ready, there was a show in the Mount Road branch, and not a single one sold. And it was the most embarrassing thing for my boss. His name was Deepak Mukherjee. Deepak then ended up buying 3-4 of those paintings. None of us could afford any of it, and nor did any of it make any sense. But the painter was Souza. So it started off a little curiosity about modern art or contemporary art at that time. And I made a first visit to a gallery while I was an employee at Greenlays. And I bought this tiny little Hamsa Jataka painting, which was actually a hatchwork by Badri, and that started this journey. I'm a little off this journey in terms of modern art now. And the last one, next slide, is contemporary art, which after Pavitra and I met, we decided that this is something that I'm going to learn from her. She, of course, has a very strong bias for women artists, and I said, okay, let's do young artists, people who we will meet in their lifetimes, with whom we have the conversations. They are present in the galleries, and when we pay money, of course, the gallery owners will take a bit of it, but for the most part, it goes to the artists themselves. So, in that sense, it's so much more direct. The connection and the conversations were so much more direct. And of course, Pavitra introduced me to people like Ritika, and of course, Jethro on the other side. He's a British artist, of course, who came to India, trained in Jaipur and in the miniature tradition, does some outstanding work, and a whole bunch of other artists in that, oeuvre. Basically, youngsters in sub 40 and who are, very contemporary. A lot of them have influences from the miniature traditions, but this is one of the areas where a lot of both of our collective efforts are going into. So that's it, and anything more we'll discuss as we go along.
Thank you, Paul. I think all the introductions have covered a lot of my questions. But I think a common question or two to all speakers, something which I want to ask all four of you is, why do you collect? Why do you collect? Because why not see it from afar? Why not go to museums, see it, enjoy it for what it is? Collecting is often a habit, could be called an addiction, an expensive one maybe. So what makes you want to own and collect pieces in your collection?
Sure. I think that's an interesting question. I mean, for me personally, it's because it really speaks to me, and there's something about it that I find very meaningful or very personal. And obviously, as a person who curates art for other people and who advises people on art and artifacts and things like that, one tends to see a lot of things, and one tends to assess a lot of things somewhat clinically. So for me, the things I collect are those things that I lose sleep over, and the things that I remember. So I never buy anything in the moment, but if I'm still thinking about it, a week later, 2 weeks later, and I feel that that's something visceral that speaks to me, that's my yardstick. Very emotional, very impractical, but that's it.
Yeah, I think the question's a bit personal, but we would love to know the answers. I think Farooq next.
So actually for me, having grown up in a family of collectors, it was the most natural thing to actually collect. And a variety of collections were formed. As time goes by, you lose interest in some, others take their place. But it's always something you always collect something at some point of time. Why do you collect? It's just a personal thing. I mean, you like to own things. You see things, you like them, you want them, you can afford them, so you buy them. And you enjoy them. Yeah, tell me.
Farooq has been integral to my collecting journey. So sometimes you collect because you have a friend or someone that you share an interest with. I mean, this is true of Farooq, it's true of Paul as well in my life. And what they tell you, or the doors that they open to you, or the discoveries that you make, sometimes lead you to collect something. So for example, I always admired Bhuta, but it was Farooq who told me the stories and talked to me about folk art and introduced me to this idea of what happens in village life. You know, at 20 years ago, that opened a chapter which touched something. Yeah. So I think often collecting, we think of it as a solitary journey, but it really is not. Honestly, a lot of the things I collect today, I have a council of elders, which is my lovely team that I work with, that I spend a lot of time with. And very often I'll ask them for an opinion, and that's integral to the buying or acquisition of something. So we think of it as solitary, but it's not. It's actually a very collective thing. Sorry,
No, I think.
No. Absolutely, yeah.
To Rajan, your collection goes into the lakhs, so where do you stop collecting, I guess, is the question.
Once you start collecting, you never stop. I always found that every person is a collector. You have your own things. If you have an own cupboard, what you keep is your collection. Maybe if it is clothes or something which has to be changed according to fashion, or it becomes non-wearable, but everybody has got a collection. People in the beginning start with a collection, and as they are building up, at some point of time, they realize that now I should be growing out of this collection. I see my friends, etc., collecting paintings, and I'm still collecting marbles and such small things. Yeah, that's what happens. But that luckily did not happen to me. because as it is, I did not have any friend who was collecting. A little bit of collection at the school level was photographs from sports and pastime about cricketers. Everybody loves cricket. But people see that magazine and throw it away. I used to keep that magazine, cut out those things, and I still have about 5 to 6 albums, which are scrap albums, which are still in my collection. Just for the sake of it, I've kept it. So collection is something which never stops. But there are two things. First thing is that, as per the advice of my guide friend and philosopher, he said you don't start collecting. If you're a stamp collector, you cannot say that I want to collect all the stamps of the world. So you have to start with a very small subject and continue to focus on that subject. Now I'll tell you, when I started the Shammi Kapoor collection, and when I circulated the word in Chor Bazaar, there were 4 shops that time, and they said that अच्छा है, शम्मी कपूर का कोई मांगता ही नहीं है, खाली देवानंद, दिलीप कुमार और राज कपूर का ही मटेरियल बेचता है. So I said, very good, I don't have competitor. So I took everything that was available. Then those same fellows started, every time I used to go, कुछ शम्मी कपूर का आया क्या मटेरियल? No साहब, सबको आपको दे दिया, अभी तुम कोई देवानंद चालू करो. I said, no, I will stick to Shammi Kapoor only. And that's how you keep on building the collection. When you feel that now you have reached a stage where you can be identified as the best collector of particular subject. Same thing in Matchbox labels. Now, right now, Matchbox labels, by way of quantity, I'm not very happy. But now I only focus collecting Matchbox labels which are pre-1890. So those labels are very not easy to come by. In my foreign trips, I pick up some of them. So idea is that you focus on a small subject and keep on collecting. You can never stop collecting.
Thank you. Paul?
Well, for me, it's a mix of things, actually. One, of course, is the pride and pleasure of ownership. I'm very candid about that. I love sometimes to see some things on the wall and see some things which I can pull out of the cupboard and actually sit with. The second is, of course, to be able to get more insight. So when I collected coins, I needed to decipher coins. Mughal coins are all Persian, Urdu, whatever. And I learned Urdu. For many years I learned Urdu, and that helped me. But Urdu opened so many other windows: music, literature, this, that, and I'm not still very, fluent, but I can make out many things now. So when a song is playing, I now understand the lyrics, I understand the vocabulary, I understand the words, and all of that. The second thing I think is preservation and patronage, because I find, for example, in the living traditions thing, actually sitting with these people. I've gone to faraway Mithila, Dharmavaram, Ahmedabad, wherever, and spent hours with some of these artisans, and it's just incredible. The context is, we don't understand. We don't understand the elaborate nature. Now, for example, I went to Dharmavaram. There's a guy I work with. His name is Chidambara Rao, in the leather puppets thing. He's the one who opened me to a whole new vista. And I first met him here at Paramparik. The man was selling leather lamps and lanterns and things like that. But he's nothing short of a genius, He knows the Ramayana by heart. He sings and performs. He actually makes the leather puppets. And he's the one who, taught me the whole history, starting in Pinguli in Maharashtra, and then how it went to Andhra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, Orissa. Taught me about each of these having a different Ramayana in which they are anchored, And of course taught me also about the Ravanachaya in Orissa, which he said, actually places Ravan on a pedestal. So it seems that Ravan wanted to die at the hands of Ram, because that was the highest form of salvation, and therefore he contrived all of this stuff to die at the hands of Ram. I mean, that's the kind of perspective and story you'll never hear. So that is there. And the third part is what we do together. It's amazing. We go to shows together, we chat for hours, we go to the art fairs, we go to exhibitions, and then we buy something, we discuss, we meet the artist. It's occasion for so much conversation. So some of these collections are a result of some of those incredible conversations.
I think, just to add to what Paul is saying, I think a common thread, that I'm hearing with Raj and Farooq, all of us, is I think ultimately we all love stories. So maybe we collect because that's our way of holding on to some of these stories. And, I think we live in such a transient, ephemeral world, and it just gets more and more so every day. And I think perhaps objects are a way of holding on to stories that have meaning for us, that have meaning in our culture, that say something to the generations. Many of the things that Paul and I try to collect now are for our children, for them to have a sense of their ancestry, where they come from, where they're going. So I think ultimately stories, that's what we're collecting.
Yeah, especially with the coin. If maybe it didn't come into a collection, if it was an archive, we wouldn't have known that particular individual ever existed. Yeah. My next question is to Pavitra very specifically. Art and design are often categorized separately, but there's a very blurred line between, or boundary between them. You, within your career, has kind of used it to your advantage, navigated through art and design, with spillovers on both sides. Even if it's your office, there's contemporary work, there's living traditions or traditional art. There's IKEA furniture along with peer genres. There's important artworks with the backdrop of a Good Earth wallpaper. How have you navigated collecting, especially with how you set up wherever you live, between the spheres of art, design, architecture?
Interesting question. I think the core of that question is, how do you assign value to something? And I think perhaps something that allows me to go easily between these worlds that we describe as art or design or brand is really that value is not attributed to something only through economics. So it's not the price of something that determines its value. And in fact, I think that the most refined eye is one that's able to assimilate across some of these boundaries, because in reality they don't exist. In the Indian context, for example, form equals function. I remember my great-grandmother used to have this coconut scraper. In Tamil, it's called an arvamane. You basically have a little thing that comes out ahead and you scrape the coconut. And it was shaped like a beautiful peacock. So I think that this is inherent to us in our culture. And some of these divisions, this is art, that is design, this is high, this is low. I don't think those are, if I may say so, Indian ideas. I think that in India, everything has had value. The smallest thing, whether it's the coconut kernel, has had as much value as something that you put in your puja room or the finial that you put on top. So I think for me, I pride myself on being Indian in my sensibilities, and I think therefore some of these silos don't exist in my mind. A Tolu Bomalata puppet by Chidambara Rao has as much value to me as something created by Arpita Singh. In fact, I feel textiles have even greater value, because textiles were, for us on the subcontinent, our first history books. In oral cultures like ours, it is community-led objects like textiles. Many of the textiles we look at, the pulkaris, for example, Paul talked about Matani Pacheris. I mean, there are so many bandhanis. There are so many textiles from different parts of our country. They were all collectors of history. And I just came back from Srinagar yesterday. I was there with my colleagues, Maithili and Tanish, and we were fascinated that the pashminas are all washed in the jhelum. So the only reason a pashmina acquires its softness is because it's washed in the jhelum. A Matani Pacheri looks the way it does because it's washed in the Sabarmati. The history, geography of our country are so tightly intermingled with craft and culture that there is no separation. So I think I don't, for me it's not a thing.
Sure, thank you. To Farooq, Philips has just finished 100 years under the Isa family. It's crossed 150 years. 5 generations of collectors or people being tastemakers to maybe a lot of people in India on helping them collect, including Pavitra. It was a pharmacy in the beginning. I think it sold leather products at some point, Chinese porcelain, furniture. How has this evolved with each generation, and where is it headed now?
I think with each passing, generation, the shop evolves as well, in terms of what we sell, how we present the things, who the buyers are. It depends on various things, like, for example, current trends in collecting, or interests, or what's available. That dictates as well. So, for example, we used to sell European items in the 60s, chandeliers, clocks, porcelains, Dresden, Meissen. Also, that was what was being collected, marble figurines. As time went by, Indian art, miniatures, decorative arts, bronzes, sculpture, silver, paintings, then photography, Daniel's prints, maps, company school. It's so many things. But it just evolves with, now for example, we are also doing a lot of folk art and tribal art now, older pieces, some more contemporary artists too. It's things also that we personally like. Now, I wouldn't sell things which, don't appeal to us, or, just because they sell, I wouldn't just sell them, So they've got to strike a chord there as well. And well, I think the mix over the years has been interesting. Still, I feel, things are available. They're just different things, and people appreciate them. So that's good. In every way.
Yeah. And Rajan, I think you spoke earlier about your visits to Chor Bazaar. If anyone else wants to add, Chor Bazaar is very integral to Bombay. Whether you're a collector or not, you might have picked up something from Chor Bazaar. Any interesting stories you have from your visits to Chor Bazaar, especially around Bombay itself? I saw the tram ticket earlier. Was there anything you found within Chor Bazaar which talked about something which we all might not know about our beautiful city?
Yeah, rightly. Half of Chor Bazaar is not existing. But once you specialize yourself in particular subject, then the dealers know what you are looking at. And now I don't have to go there. They show it on WhatsApp. They tell the condition. They quote the price. We bargain, and the thing comes to my house. So that's how the thing moves. Anyway, first my introduction to Chor Bazaar was way back, and it was just accidental. In our house, we used to celebrate Ganesha and Gauri. Now, Gauri was a function where the ladies used to be invited, and we used to have a little decoration around that. So just while decorating, one of the flower was broke. Now, tomorrow is Gauri, and where do we get the second flower vase? Somehow there we managed it. Then I said, I must have a second one. From where do I get it? There was one Parsi shop called Automa Cookers. They used to sell cookers. But I had noticed in their shop there was a lot of artifacts which had nothing to do with cooker business were there. So I walked up to an uncle. I told him that, uncle, this is the flower vase that I have. Other one is broken. Can we get a second one? He said, there is no guarantee you'll get a second one. But I can assure you that you'll get two pair, but different size, shape. So I said, where? એમ કને દીકરા તું Sunday મારી સાથે ચોર બજારમાં આવ. So we went on a Sunday, and he took me to the correct shop. I picked up ultimately this. I said, you bargain and do whatever, I'll pick it up. And that's how my journey started. Now that Parsi is gone, we no more stay at there, but the Chor Bazaar road goes from my house to Chor Bazaar. The road is the same. So it becomes a habit, and the thing is that since my collection was initially not focused on a particular subject, I used to like everything till I met Gorakshakar and he streamlined me. I used to pick up quite a few things which I would not have picked up maybe 10 years down the line. But Chor Bazaar connection continued. It is not that I used to visit every shop in Chor Bazaar, because then I found that certain shops sell my particular subject. Like for example, glass and porcelain. I collect everything on which the word Bombay is written. So it's a very large canvas. And I was telling Farooq that my latest this collection is of Green's Hotel. Now there was a Green's Hotel next to Taj Mahal, the old Taj, where now you have the tower, the Taj Tower. There was a Green's Hotel which was demolished around 1965 or something, and their rice plate was available with their monogram on this, Green's Apollo Pier, Bombay. So what Bombay came, the dealer immediately called me. He didn't know what was Green's, he didn't know, of course Apollo Pier he knew. So saab aapka kaam ka cheez aaya hai. So that's how I developed now people from even out of Bombay. When they find anything of Bombay, then when I went into a collection of letterheads with Bombay address, then the canvas was quite big. Not only in Bombay, but people from all over the place started giving me share certificate. The word only Bombay has to be there, and it has to be pre-independence. So that was the condition.
But
So
Chor Bazaar has, I think, defined the last 30 years for anyone who's collecting in Bombay. And I feel sad that it's gone to WhatsApp, because honestly, to go and sit in, Hatim Bhai's shop and have firni and kebab and faluda is part of the experience of collecting. So I think, and I would say to young people here, I got a lot of requests on Instagram from people saying, you must tell me names of stores, so I am going to tell you one. And to say that, a great place if you're a young collector is Grameen Arts. He's in Oshiwara. His name is Manish, but he and his dad have a fabulous eye, and you can still today get beautiful things, very, very inexpensive, because he just enjoys collecting and sharing. And when I say inexpensive, he has things from 500 rupees all the way up, and some really interesting things. So if you DM me on Instagram, I'll share his number. I promised a few people I would.
I'm going to DM you for sure. Paul, like we've all talked about collections, our own collections, but there's an aspect of Sarmaya specifically. Well, if we look at online collections, or we know the ASI archives things. Sometimes different collections are put just as an archive. Sarmaya has a digital-first approach. It's known for its accessibility, its reach to young people. Why was it always online, and how has the online journey been happening? Has it got something to do with COVID also at the time?
Well, I think, there's a very senior person and they're still around, so they'll go unnamed, but, told me that, listen, there is nothing to match standing in front of the object. And the wow of standing in front of a physical object cannot be matched. And I thought about it and I said, what is it as binary as that? What if I can't come to CSMVS to stand in front of an object? So in India, if you go to schools, they have an annual outbound event, which is go to a museum, go to a this thing, go to a zoo or whatever. And I saw once in Udaipur where this snake of children with their fingers locked were going through the City Palace Museum. And anytime the kid stopped, ma'am, ye kya hai? Shh, chalo, 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 chalo. So the whole snake wound its way out and was done. And I said, it's so sad. And I had a similar experience in the Blenheim Palace in UK, where a teacher brought 40 kids and walked straight through the museum, not stopping anywhere. And I kind of was curious and I asked, ma'am, why are you not letting them stop? And she said, no, today it's one object. So there's a tapestry, which is the Battle of Waterloo. And all the kids was, made to sit in front of that. And for 2.5 hours, they opened up that tapestry, in the conversation, What was English and French history? What was the uniform, why was that blue, why is this red, which time of the year was this battle, what are the trees you can see in the background, is it oak, it's maple, this, that and the other, what are the army formations you can see, cavalry, infantry, this, that. 2.5 hours, one work, one gigantic tapestry. And thereafter, I don't think any of those kids would walk past anything without seeing 3 or 4 perspectives, right? So that's one experience. But for me, the whole thing was it not being binary. If I cannot come to CSMUS, then am I doomed never to ever see an object or know about it or learn about it? And the answer was strictly no. What if I can give you 70% of the experience, but the digital medium allows me to layer my storytelling so much more than going and seeing the 60 character metadata next to an object and forever, never going back to that object. Here, you have Instagram, you have the website, you have YouTube, you have Facebook, you have the short format, you have the visual format, you have the verbal format, you have the long form written format. You can engage in any format you want, as long as you have that opportunity for your curiosity to be sparked. And that was the whole idea. I mean, when we did our first inaugural program some years ago with Pratham, we just did 3 states, Maharashtra, Uttarakhand and Rajasthan. And we did the content in 2 languages, Hindi and English. 1,000 school, 60,000 kids were consuming our content every, now that's going to 11 vernacular languages, going across many more states and things like that. The numbers, and just to give people access, even if the access may not be 100% physical, wow, you have 70% and then layered storytelling, the capacity to do that. So I felt that the digital capacity to multiply, the multiplier effect of digital is just way, way more than just the physical.
Hey, not to hijack your panel, but can I ask Farooq a question?
Sure, absolutely.
Farooq, I'm just curious, before digital, just talking about digital, you were very, you needed a person like yourself, a place like Phillips Antiques, to go and see a curation of objects and things, right? Because you relied on the curatorial eye of the gallerist or the curatorial eye of a person such as yourself who was bringing objects to you, who told you provenance, quality. Today with digital, what happens is like every day I get 30 messages from people saying, hello ma'am, here's this painting and here's that. So how has digital changed access to objects and things to collect, and B, how has that changed the experience of retail, and how what's your response to that? Sorry.
No problem. Just this would be the last question, and we'll be opening it up to Q&A.
So certainly, Pavitra has changed a lot. The thing is that I'm a little old-fashioned, so I still really value a face-to-face interaction, visit to a gallery, visit to a shop, talking with people, sitting down, firsthand. However, lots of young collectors, other, people, don't go solely by that. I mean, they're happy to look at websites, Instagram. It's been an eye-opener for us because, before all this came in, that was the only way. But now it's a whole new dimension because you can, show videos, detailed photographs, descriptions. People who can't travel, visit you personally. How do they, buy? So people are used to it. In fact, I was just reading that auctions, Christie's or somebody was saying that 80% of their bids are online now. People can't attend auctions, in person. They can't even view. So they have to rely on, digital media, which is fine because it can give you in a short time, access to a lot. I mean, you can visit a place once. You can't come there, every day. but then you've got access to, art, huge, if you have digital and other, imagery. So I think it's change. It's a game changer for everything. No substitute for a visit, because then certainly if you're lucky enough to, be able to visit a museum, a gallery, a shop, that adds a whole new dimension. But if you can't, then this is good. This is the next best. Yeah.
Thank.
One little bit. I think, if I give you a Nicosia coin to hold in your hand, there's no greater feeling. Or if I give you a Nisar, a coin which the emperor used to sit on the back of an elephant and throw into the crowd, and you got that in your hand, and even if it may not be true, to imagine that this was the coin Shah Jahan was holding and you are holding is, it's a fantastic experience. But the story of the Nisar has to be told to 1 million people more than those who can hold it in their hand, right?
Talking about the experience of holding something in your hand, well, about 15 years ago, when I was the vice president of the Asiatic Society, the request came from Italian consul in Bombay that they wanted to hold in their hand the Divine Comedy Dates. Divine Comedies, there are only 2 copies existing, one in Asiatic and other I believe is in Milan Museum. He just wanted to hold it. Now the committee said that you should not allow it to hold, you just show it to them. And this is in the State Bank of India locker. The locker can be opened only by 3 office bearers, which we did. We got it. That fellow was literally crying. He was actually literally crying, why can I not touch it? So we said, no, sorry. Then ultimately said, okay, you can touch it, no? So you hold it and I will stand next to you, and took some photographs. But then I went a little further. If you are familiar with the Asiatic Society, the side entrance has got Jagannath Sankarshet big statue, and there is a spiral staircase. At the bottom of the staircase, I found that me and the photographer were there, and the committee members, he said that I want to take this photograph with that big statue. So I just went down. I said, now hold it. Before your photographer does anything, hold it. Happy? Come on, let's go.
We just have 2 questions we can take.
Okay, how often do you churn your collection?
Never. I only buy if I can live with it forever, and I only buy what I can put on my walls. I never store anything. I think if you really love something, you must treasure it enough to put it on your walls or wherever it is, or use it. So all of my textiles I use for Christmas, for Diwali, I put the art. I think the answer for me is never.
Can I give an extension to Farooq? Like, a lot of the works you collect are for other collectors to be taken. So how do you...
It's the same.
What are you asking actually?
No, you often collect...
No, how often do you churn your stuff? Like you see your portfolio.
For me, actually, yeah, you're right. Certain things hold your interest for a certain amount of time, and then you lose interest in those things. So you don't discard them, but you just sort of relegate them on the side.
And you said it.
But one fine day, no, you might.
If you beg hard
I mean,
enough,
I am lucky enough I have a venue to sell. But other collectors, I mean, I know that collectors do, they do flit from one to the other, because depending on, what's catching their fancy at a particular time, they go in for that. They do keep everything, mostly. And I know many people who go back to things after years and again revive, that collection. So it's just compartmentalized. So today I want this, but I've got those 3-4 things there, and I like them, but this is my current interest. So you're right, it can, rotate collections.
I think we have time for a quick last question.
So I did have a question for Mr. Jaikar in the beginning, but I think hearing the panel, I'll just open it up to anyone. I wanted to know how would you all distinguish between being a prolific collector and a hoarder? Sometimes I feel that it does border into too many objects, not just value-wise, but in terms of just the sheer number of items. Typically, like Paul mentioned, for example, you start with the fulcrum, Mughal history, and then you move into other different areas and there's different categories and verticals and, but then, how do you prevent yourself sometimes from jumping from one into the other, or does it happen naturally and then you can't really help it and you go with it?
Yeah.
Is it a question to me?
Yes, it's a question to you.
Yeah. I always found that there are 3 types of collectors. Luckily, only 2 types are sitting on the stage. Other are general collectors. They go to the shop, they like a particular thing, they feel this is sit very well in my living room or in my bedroom, they take it. That is general, they just don't have any passion for collecting on a particular subject. The other type of collector is, most of us like here, except Farooq to an extent, that we are collectors and we are not sellers. So these are the people who collect, they preserve, they do research, they keep on adding, and of course displaying. But Farooq is a 2 category. He is a person who is a dealer, but also I'm sure he has got, I know that he has got some of his special collection. So these are the 3 type of collectors which are there. The line between all these 3 is very small, because at some point of time the collector may feel that now enough is enough, I want to sell. Overnight he doesn't become a dealer, because while collecting never thought of selling. So these are blurred lines.
For
Thank
Paul,
you.
the distinction between collector and hoarder is his wife shouting at him.
And with that, I think we'll have give it back to
I think
Asad.
talking about the topic of the art of collecting, Avid has collected the most amazing panel out here. I mean, we can hear them talk for another 2 hours, but I think we'll do a whole day seminar next time on collecting. But thank you all. Thank you, Paul, Farooq, Raja, and Pavitra, and Joe for so skillfully moderating the conversation. Thank you, NGMA, Shruti, and Nazneen ji for hosting us. I had a longer speech, but I'm not going to bore you with that. I just have to plug my next Avid program. So our next program is on Saturday. We have Stories That Matters. It's a photojournalism workshop with Ritesh. So in case you're interested, please sign up or check out our website and you can register out there, or tune into our website for more of our programs. This is the 3rd and the final out of the programs we curated around the Air India collection. And the idea was not to talk about the Air India collection, but to use the collection as the muse for having these discussions. I strongly recommend you'll go see the show. It is fantastic. To see some of those works is quite special. I know many people in the audience have personal connections with these collections, including Nargis auntie out there, which I got to know even today. But go check the show out. It's worth checking out. Anyway, thank you for coming, braving the rains and the floods and all that, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much, Aditya.